I'm Nella from Winnipeg BJD, and welcome to part 2 of BJD history, 1999 to 2004, which these girls slot in quite nicely, as I will address. So in part 1 we covered the history of ball-jointed dolls prior to 1999, and now we're getting into the modern ball-jointed dolls. We're going to have to repeat the definition of modern ball-jointed dolls because I'm not sure how many of you saw the first video. So, the definition we're working off of is that a modern ball-jointed doll is a doll that has a ball and socket type of articulation. So the joint is a ball that fits into a socket and it moves in the socket, and that's how it can be posed. The posing is possible because they are strung with elastic, which is characteristic number 2. And characteristic number 3 is what distinguishes modern ball-jointed dolls from the antique ball-jointed dolls that came before them, and also the Japanese fine art ball-jointed dolls that directly precede the modern ball-jointed dolls. So, like I said at the end of the previous video, in 1998, the Volks sculptor, Mr. Enku, gave his wife a present, and this was a one-of-a-kind ball-jointed doll that he had sculpted. And the wife of the president of Volks saw this doll and proposed that release a customizable ball-jointed doll made out of resin for the wider market. This made sense for Volks for a few reasons. The main reason being that Volks specialized in garage kits. Now, for anyone who, has no idea what that term means, it's a term from figures. Garage kits were figures that you assembled yourself, and you used typically a type of glue or cement-like substance to keep the parts in place, and then you painted it yourself. These kits were typically highly detailed, absolutely amazing. They're still released, but they're nowhere near as popular and ubiquitous as they were in the 80s and 90s. So by 1998, Volks is realizing that they're not sure they can depend on just the garage kits to keep going as a company. The idea of a customizable figure, though, would allow them to break into the female market, at least in their minds. They were aiming for the female market with the modern ball-jointed doll. Because they were thinking, well, they can dress them, they can paint them like they would our figures, but they can pose them, which they can't do with a garage kit. And we'll make it out of resin because we have experience working with resin. And wouldn't you know it, resin is kind of the perfect material for these dolls. But that's something that I cover in the Not Your Average Doll panel that's this afternoon. The date that you have to remember in the ball-jointed doll history, if you have to remember one, I'm going to say it's the very first Volks Dolls Party, or Dollpa, as they would come to be known. And that was when Volks announced and released their very first Super Dollfie. The Super Dollfies would lead to the whole modern ball-jointed doll hobby. All goes back to this day. There were 4 dolls released. However, they all shared the same face underneath their makeup. Makeup in the ball-jointed doll hobby, by the way, is called a face-up. and it's what allows your doll to have eyebrows and lip color and blush and all of those things. The sculpt, as the 4 dolls all shared the same head sculpt, was nicknamed the 4 Sisters mold. The 4 sisters being Megu, Nana, Kira, and Sarah. Sarah was blonde, Nana was a brunette, Kira was a brunette as well, but she had wavy or curly hair, and Megu had black hair. Megu and Kira were more expensive than Nana and Sarah, and that's simply due to the fact that they had better quality wigs. If you had purchased one of these very first Super Dollfies, here's what you'd be getting. You get a fully assembled doll that's painted and has eyes and a wig. That's it. There's no clothing. And one of the things that these first dolls had that later dolls have gotten rid of is a very old style of articulation. Now, articulation is a step up from the BJD dolls from Jumeau from the 1870s to 1920s, and then the German ball-jointed dolls from the same time period. This did not mean that they were super well articulated. For one thing, there is no torso joint in them. That's right. Look at this picture. Look, the body, the torso of the body is one piece. Something else about these very first Super Dollfies, they kind of had a problem with standing, in that they didn't stand. They can kind of sit, and they sprawl absolutely beautifully, but standing, no, that's not a good idea. This was corrected with later versions of the Super Dollfie body, but for those first ones, if you're going to try to make them stand, you are going to need a heavy-duty stand. But as many problems as they had, they were popular. It was a successful launch. This led Volks to decide to jump all in with these ball-jointed dolls, with their Super Dollfies. And the new releases and the new changes and important steps in the history of ball-jointed dolls just keep coming faster and faster. At the April 30th, 2000 Dolpa, Volks released their first limited edition. It was also their first doll in white skin. Prior to this, Volks had been releasing their dolls in kind of a flesh tone that had a yellow undertone, which is still the color that they cast their dolls in to this day. But the very first limited edition they made was made out of white resin. And it was Megu. She was in a kimono. And she was limited to 30 dolls. Only 30. Also, at this dolls party, or this event, they released a doll that had not been sculpted by Mr. Enku. Instead, it had been sculpted by Gentaro Araki. And this is actually the book of photos of that doll release, by the way. Gentaro Araki, is a still is to this day, I believe, a popular manga artist and figure artist. And he collaborated with Volks, and he sculpted these dolls, and they were sold from their debut, the April 30th, 2000, up until 2004. And he actually ended up making his own line of ball jointed dolls, which are ridiculously popular because the sculpting is gorgeous. And he also came up with this brilliant idea of option pose, in that you can give your doll cat ears or you can give them horns. And he also came up with a very interesting mechanism that he uses to this day in his dolls, where you can actually adjust where the eyes are pointing with a little mechanism that's right by the ears. But he only ever did the one doll with Volks, and the doll was called a Unos. So in addition to being sales events and places to announce new releases and limited editions, Volks's Dolls Party, shortened to Dollpa, were also a way for the budding ball jointed doll community to meet as a group. And one of the dolls that was at one of these early Dollpas was a No-No, which was a sculpt that Volks came out with that had these very large eyes. And the person who had purchased a No-No and brought it to one of these Dollpas had decided to make those eyes even larger. Now, one of the sculptors for Volks was at that Dollpa and saw it and said, "That's amazing! Do you mind if we use your idea of making the eyes bigger and making a little change to the mouth to design a new doll sculpt?" Well, think about what you'd say in that situation. Of course! And Volks actually asked this person, the owner, we unfortunately don't have their name, if they would make the first limited edition of this doll sculpt that was based on their own modified doll. That was released December 10th of 2000. It was limited to 50 doll that was released at this Dollpa in December of 2000 was Ian. Now, Ian never got a product line name, so it wasn't like Super Dollfie Ian. No, Ian was actually much smaller than the Super Dollfies, which are 56 centimeters tall. Ian was a prototype, sort of. It's only released once, and only at this one event. Let me show you actually from my book here. It's called the Super Dollfie Bible. It came out in 2004, end of 2004. So there's Ian. So Ian was released at the December 2000 Dollpa. Ian was based on a character from a manga by Kei Tomei. And there were 100 assembled dolls, so dolls that looked exactly like this. And then there were 200 of what we call kit dolls, which is a doll that had no face up and was not already strung with elastic. It came with everything you need to put them together, but basically the company hadn't done it for you. Which meant that they were a bit cheaper if you got a kit because you're doing part of the work yourself. Now, Ian would lead to Volks's second line, or size rather, which is a very fun size. I have to say, it's one I like. It's called the Mini Super Dollfie. So it is now September 30th, 2001. Super Dollfies have not been around for very long. They've been around for 2 years now. But Volks has decided they are going to release a size that is smaller than the Super Dollfie, something that is smaller than 56 centimeters. Ian gave them an idea of height, but they decided to go a little bit bigger. And they came up with Mini Super Dollfie. That was announced, like I said, at the September 30th, 2001 Doll Pop. Much like the Four Sisters 2 years prior, the very first ones all used the same head sculpt and were all girls. There were 3 of them this time. There was, I'm not sure if I'm going to get this right, I can get 2 of them right, Sakura and Maggie, and Miu. Mayu? M-Y-U is how it's done in Latin letters. Not sure the pronunciation. However, unlike those 100 limited editions of Ian, these dolls you had to put together. They came only as a kit, which is fine once you've learned how to string a doll together, but I think if that had been my first time handling a ball jointed doll, I would have been intimidated. Like the kit versions of Ian, these dolls were unassembled, came with eyes, a wig, and no face up. You could, if you, like me, would have been intimidated by this, could have paid Volks a small fee to assemble and give the doll a face up. Let's move to the end of 2001. Volks decides, well, now we've got our standard size, and we've got a small size. But what about people who want a more mature version of those standard dolls that we have, the standard size? Let's make a line for them too. So on December 9th, 2001, the SD13 line was announced. And I actually have an SD13 girl from Volks, who I'll have kneel because of the height of this. So my girl is not from 2001, she's from 2003. However, the body is exactly the same as those very first ones, released December 9th, 2001. The big differences between the standard Super Dollfie and the SD13 Super Dollfies was that the SD13 girls have a torso joint, which I'm not going to show you right now, but she's got a joint right here that allows her to bend. So that's already one huge change. The other thing is that all of them came with high-heeled feet, as opposed to flat feet. To kind of carry on the tradition, since these were just supposed to be kind of a bit older version of the standard Super Dollfie, they released Megu, Nana, Kira, and Sarah as SD13 dolls with a brand new face. By which I mean they all shared the same face, but it was different from the original Four Sisters. This one is called the Four Sisters 13. And Umiko here is actually a Megu. And she is wearing her eyes that came with her in 2003 and the wig that came with her in 2003. One of the other differences with the SD13 was that since there was that 2-part torso, that allowed the girls to have different sizes of breasts. Now, that just meant that there was a small, which was the equivalent of the standard Super Dollfie, and then a medium size and a large. And Megu has the large size. What if you wanted a boy? What could you do? Well, not much. So from 1999 to 2001, if you wanted a boy Super Dollfie, you were going to have to modify your girl Super Dollfie, I'm sorry to say. Yeah, going to have to do some emergency surgery on them. But at the same Dollpa that Volks announced that they were making more mature Super Dollfies, they announced, hey, we made a boy. We heard you. You said you wanted a boy, so we made one. The very first boy that they released, Licht, which was a brand new head sculpt. They released a girl with the head sculpt, Leona. And Licht proved to be so popular that those 50 dolls that they had made were not enough. So they made another 50, and then that sold out. And then they made another 50, and that sold out. And then they said, that's enough. That's all there's going to be in the world. There will only be 150 Licht in the entire world. That's it. Let's jump forward to May 5th of 2002. And Volks starts their very first collaboration dolls. I'm going to say their very first collaboration dolls other than, you know, the Unos that they did in 2000. No, these were dolls that were sculpted by Volks, by their in-house sculpting team, but that would be dressed and styled by another company. And their very first ones were Gothic Lolita. So there was a doll dressed in Baby the Stars Shine Bright clothes. There was a doll that was styled by Atelier Perrault. There were 2 dolls styled by Black Peace Now. Volks also released their very first SD13 limited edition doll, which was styled in a Gothic Lolita style way, very Gothic in fact. However, the company that made the clothing was not named. They also made a very angelic, very Lolita doll, but likewise there was no indication of what company precisely made the clothing. But that was not the end of the collaboration dolls. No, Volks also released something that is well sought after by a lot of people in the hobby to this day, a Super Dollfie version of Chi from Chobits. Yes, including the ears, which you could actually open up and, you know, stick a cable in. You could do that. They also announced their first standard release of a boy doll. They had seen how popular Licht was and went, we need to make sure that this is available all the time. I forgot to mention that in June 2001, the Volks Mimi sculpt was released, and Usagi here is a Volks Mimi from 2002. Now it is 2002. Volks has 3 lines. They now have boys. They've done collaborations with not only Gothic Lolita brands, but also with Clamp to do Chi from Chobits. Which I really want to see that doll in person so badly. But that's not all that has happened. Before we end 2004, we have 2 more important dolls from Volks to mention. August 25th, 2002, Volks released their first limited editions of the Mini Super Dollfie, which, much like the very first limited editions of the Super Dollfies, is the same head mold as their regular release, but sold assembled, all painted with the wig, eyes, and outfit, including shoes. In 2004, Volks did a collaboration with the movie Kamikaze Girls, which, if you're into Gothic Lolita fashion, You should check out that movie if you have not already seen it. It is a classic for a reason. And they made a doll of the main character. And Baby the Stars Shine Bright did the outfits, not just the outfit that came with the doll, but also 3 different outfits and shoes that you could buy for that doll. They also made human versions of the dresses so you could match. Now we're at the 2004 Dollfie on May 2nd, and Volks once again seeing that there's kind of a demand in the Super Dollfie hobby for something a little bit different than what they already have. In this case, it's people who like the size of the mini Super Dollfie but don't like how childish they are. They want a more mature figure. And for them, Volks releases the Super Dollfie Cute line. However, this line is never made a regular release. These dolls were only available as limited editions and only at the Dollfies. They upped the articulation game. The joints, we were starting to see double joints, which are joints that allow a bend to more than 90 degrees. As well, the Super Dollfie Cutes had a 3-part torso. So they didn't just have a torso joint at the waist, like the SD13 dolls did. They had one at the waist and then also at the hips. Your mileage may vary on how helpful this actually is for your everyday posing. This kind of 3-part versus 2-part torso debate continues to this day in the modern ball jointed doll hobby. But I should say, as much as Volks started everything, that doesn't mean they were the only company. Or at least they certainly weren't the only company for long. So I'm going to quickly go over some companies that started in that between, let's say, between 2000 and 2004. There were many companies, though not as many as there have been now. But unfortunately, unlike Volks, a number of these companies have closed or just don't have this information available in English, or it hasn't been translated yet. But let's jump into some of those other companies. So first on the scene was Lutz. Now Lutz is a Korean company that is still in business, and they were established in 2000. They started off as kind of a doll accessories dealer, so they sold the wigs and the eyes and the clothing and stuff for Super Dollfies. They quickly realized that as much as Super Dollfies appealed to people, the faces didn't appeal to everyone. There was definitely room for competition, shall we say. In November 2002, Lutz released their first ball-jointed doll. It was sculpted by the sculpting team Cerberus Project, and this doll was called Ai. Ai was limited to 68 dolls. Now, Ai was only ever released the once because they were accused by the ball jointed doll community at the time, after this doll had been released in 2002, that people were worried that it was the same as the Volks No-No doll, which had been released at the beginning of 2000. Here's a picture of those two dolls side by side. So you can clearly see that they are similar, but not the same doll. Look at the actual eye shape and look at the mouth. However, due to this controversy, Cerberus Project and Lutz decided that they would not sell Ai again. However, they did sell 3 Wink versions of her. As you can see, it's still recognizably Ai, but is also very recognizably its own unique doll. She proved to be surprisingly popular, popular enough that Cerberus Project continued to sculpt dolls, and Lutz continued to release these dolls. If Cerberus Project sounds familiar to anyone who's newer in the hobby, that's because they're the sculpting team behind Fairyland. They had kind of a falling out with Lutz in 2008, and they started up their own company. They are one of the most popular ball-jointed doll companies in the world, and Lutz itself, which now has their own in-house sculpting team, is also very popular. The next company that I'm going to cover that started in this time period was Custom House. Unlike Lutz, Custom House does not exist anymore. They went defunct. However, Lutz actually ended up purchasing a number of their molds, so their dolls live on. Custom House was based in Korea, like Lutz, and started off as a doll supply dealer, like Lutz, selling wigs and eyes and clothing for Super Dollfies. They realized, however, that they could also make their own dolls. So the company started in June of 2002, and by December of 2002, they were in the process of developing their own dolls, and in 2003, they released their dolls in the same size as the Super Dollfies, so in that 56 to 60 centimeter range, and they called them Ai, as in love. A basic doll from Custom House, one of their Ai line, included the assembled doll that had a face-up. That's already different from Volks and from what I could find of Lutz. They came with a wig and with eyes and simple clothing, but no shoes. Custom House, however, did not become well known for the simple clothing that their basic dolls came with. No, instead they became known for their unique dolls, which were one-off, one-of-a-kind, special edition dolls. Volks, though I couldn't find the precise date of when Volks started doing their one-offs, Custom House in the same time period was known for making work that was on par with what Volks was releasing. Custom House, like I said, went defunct. I will cover the whole story of what happened to Custom House in another ball joint doll history video, but it was after 2004, so we won't cover in this one. Another Korean ball joint doll company that got started in this time period was Dolmore. They began in 2002, and they launched their English website in 2005. They started off, once again, selling more so the doll supplies, such as wigs, eyes, clothing, and then developed their own dolls. Dolmore is still in business, and now continues to sell not only their own dolls, but they sell other companies' dolls, usually from smaller Korean companies that wouldn't be able to necessarily afford the cost of having the translators and the English website. Lastly, for companies we're going to cover in detail, is a company that is near and dear to my heart, and that is Seoul Doll. Once again, it is a Korean company. They do make, they started out actually making their own eyes and wigs, and they sold their own dolls pretty much as soon as they opened in 2003. However, they did not start off with making the large size doll. They actually started off with making a mini sized doll. Alwyn here is my Seoul Doll. She's a Seoul Doll Kid, which was their first line, as far as I can tell, their first line of dolls, originally released in 2003. All in here is actually from 2004 or early 2005, but we believe that it's late 2004. One of the things about Soul Doll was that their style, as you might tell next to Usagi here, it's anime, but it is it's stylized still, but not to the same sort of anime style. You can see that she actually has a defined nose and large eyes still, but not as massive in her face as Usagi's are. The first dolls for Soul Doll, like I said, were in this mini size. They were single jointed, as were almost all ball jointed dolls at this time period, until Volks kind of introduces the Super Dollfie Cutes in 2004. However, Soul Doll also jumps on double jointed bodies fairly quickly, but that's after 2004, so that'll be covered in a different video. A basic doll from Soul Doll included the wig. Let me check. It was assembled, which is already a huge difference from the Volks dolls at the same size, which you may remember were only available as kits. So instead, Soul dolls were assembled. They had a basic face-up on. They came with wigs and eyes. The wig would be the same as the one in the stock photo, versus the eyes you could request an eye color, because all of the eyes were the ones that Soul Doll themselves made. And the price also included a carrier bag. Of course, there were other companies that started around the same time. I just had a bit more trouble finding out information about them. So there was Hypomaniac from Korea. There were, which was just one person actually. There was Angel Legion, also from Korea, and Dream of Doll, also from Korea. The ball jointed dolls from China have not begun yet in this time period, but they are on the horizon. So we know that there seems to be a fairly strong Super Dollfie community beginning in Japan, and there's a lot of Korean companies coming out. But what was going on the English-speaking side of the hobby? Well, they were there. In May of 2002, the Super Dollfie community started on Yahoo Groups, and in 2004 they realized that there were way too many people for Yahoo Groups to manage. So they started a forum, and that forum was called Den of Angels, and it's still running. It is the largest English-speaking forum for ball-jointed doll hobbyists. I know, that's kind of where I got my start. not the Yahoo group, on the forum. I've been in the hobby a long time, but not that long. So we're actually approaching when I got into the hobby and when Winnipeg BJD started. Winnipeg BJD, originally known as Winnipeg Dollfie, was a live journal group that started in October 2006 as a way for the BJD collectors of Winnipeg and of Manitoba to get together to kind of just connect. And I joined the hobby in June of 2006 and joined the Winnipeg Dollfie group in 2007. So we're approaching when I got into the hobby. And with that, we've reached the end of 2004. So thanks for joining me on this ride. If you have any questions, particularly if there's anything you wanted me to like talk more about, let me know. I'm available on Discord, on social media like Tumblr and Instagram and Facebook. And the easiest way, honestly, to get in contact with me anytime, just shoot me an email. Okay. If you have any questions, same thing, just contact me via um, social media or email. Let me know what you thought, and enjoy the rest of Winterfest. If you want more of an introduction to the hobby as a whole versus its history, check out the Not Your Average Doll panel that is this afternoon. Okay, bye everyone. Happy Winterfest!